Greetings and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. Today is Monday, October 4th, 2021 at 4 p.m. To help slow the transmission of COVID-19 and protect the health and safety of the community, City Council as well as board and commission meetings will continue to be closed to the public for in-person attendance. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to practice social distancing. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse, Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high-definition HD on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. Next item, please.
1, roll call. Commissioner Jasmadarian.
Present.
Commissioner Kidikian.
Present.
Commissioner Law.
Present.
Commissioner Peterson.
Present.
President Flanagan.
Here. Next item.
2, GWP Commission staff comments.
Thank you. Let's start with commissioner comments. And we've had, I guess just reflecting on the past couple of meetings, we've had a couple of marathon meetings, joint meetings with the Sustainability Commission focusing on Shoal Canyon, and then we focused on the Grayson repowering. So we've had our heads sort of exploded, I think, or our brains kind of exploded or imploded, or whichever direction it goes. So a lot to think about as we move forward. Commissioner Jasmadarian, any specific comments before we start into today?
No comments.
Okay. Commissioner Kadikian.
No comments.
Commissioner Lowell.
No comments, just curiosity as to how our power system has been functioning with the high heat that we've had recently.
Is that something that we want to have comment from staff on right now, or
If possible, at some point during the meeting. If not, no worries.
how about we hit it right this second?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission. The load has actually been down. The heat has not been very hot. And we've been lucky, as we have been over the last few years, where the heat waves usually start on a Friday and end on a Monday. So we've been actually very fortunate. The due diligence that we did to prepare number 8 units over last winter in preparation for the summer allowed us the capability of not having to worry about power supply at this time.
Excellent.
And then just following up, what has our peak been this past week? Approximately.
270?
Oh, okay.
Something about like 270.
Good. Well, hats off to staff for having us so well prepared. Commissioner Peterson, any comments?
No comments.
Thank you very much. I don't have any specific comment for staff, but I think we're all just reminded with this oil spill that's taken place off of our coast here of how involved and how fragile our energy systems are, and just a really strong reminder of the really gross trade-offs that we make in the Faustian bargain that we've all signed, this compromise that we've all made in order to have inexpensive, reliable power and fuels. We've taken, in many cases, risks with our environment and our ecosystems, and calamities will occur. And this just, I think, reinforces the need for us to be extremely well prepared, as I think we are here in Glendale. So, very, very sobering. I think my daughter was reacting 126,000 gallons of oil. Santa Barbara was 3 million gallons. The Exxon Valdez was 11 million gallons. But I don't think the quantity is important, but when it strikes this close to home, it's a stark reminder to us all. So with that, next item, or I guess staff comments at this time. Mr. Young?
Yes, Mr. President, I don't have any comments at this time. And thank you very much for enduring those 2 marathon sessions. They were very long and contentious, and thank you very much.
They were very substantive, so we had a lot to cover, and we did cover it, so that's great. Next item, please.
Next item is 3 reports. 3A, legislation update.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I'm going to ask Leo, the Utility Legislative Affairs Analyst, to give us a report on the legislative update.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Good afternoon, President Flanagan, members of the commission. Leo Zalian here to present the legislative update. Okay. So first we have the 2021 legislative calendar. So September 10 was the last day for this legislative session. So governor has until October 10 to veto or sign any bills. January 1st is any of the statutes to take effect, and January 3rd starts the new legislative session. Next, we have some interesting development was mentioned at the last legislative update meeting. Thankfully, the both houses came up with a solution of funding utility arrearages. So we had AB 148 for the water and AB 135 that passed and provided funding for utility pass-through bills. So AB 148 was funding for the water and wastewater. There was about $998 million, so about $1 billion, and established the California Water and Wastewater Arrearages Payment Program. So, and then we have AB 135, which is provided funding for the utility for electric and gas utility bills, and that was about $1 billion. And this established the California Arrearages Payment Program, which is the CAP program, which established about $300 million for POUs. So staff is working diligently to securing funds for all our utility bills that we have past due, and we're in communication with CDC, which is the California department that handles all these utility arrearages. So we're working with CDC to secure all the funding we can for our GWP customers currently. Some important bills that we went over last time. One bill to note is AB 525, which was signed into law, which is the study that study on offshore wind, and sets a goal at 10,000 megawatts. So this is the only one that was approved by the governor, and CEC will be conducting a study to see how wind generation can be included in the state's portfolio. The next 2 bills, they just became 2-year bills. It most likely will come up at the next legislative session. I went over those 2 bills, so I'll move forward to the next slide. And then we have a few key water bills. So one of the bills, the AB 652 from our Assembly member Laura Friedman. This bill prohibits any sale of juvenile products that contain PFAS substance. So this is on governor's desk currently. So waiting for the governor to sign or veto this bill. And then we have SB 222 from Senator Dodd. This is the Water Affordability Assistance Program for low-income ratepayers. This bill became a 2-year bill, but most likely will come back next year, and we'll be looking into what happens next in the 2022 session. Next are some of the kind of key factors of what's coming up in the 2020 legislative year, some forecasts. In the energy sector, we might see bills related to the 2035 energy standards, which was kind of accelerating the RPS requirements. Some information about possibly summer preparedness to make sure that the state is prepared for any outages or they have enough to meet the state's load. Clean energy funding. At the last budget session, the governor actually was looking to fund some clean energy funding. So this didn't go through this cycle, but I believe some of the legislature will be coming up with some ideas that we might be able to tap into. Next is transportation electrification. This is to ensure we have the infrastructure to support the EVs that will be coming to our roads. And then we have procurement mandates and wildfire preparedness. And then on the water side, we have a water resiliency program, water quality, and wild preparedness. So these are just kind of some of the big topics that might be coming in the next legislative session, which will start on January 3rd, as previously mentioned. With that, that concludes my report, I believe. Staff is happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Commissioner comments and questions? Commissioner Jasmine. We can't hear you, Commissioner Jasmine. I don't know whether you want to say anything or.
Yes, I did. Sorry, I was having problems unmuting. The question I have isn't one that was listed here, but about the legislation that passed on the public meetings and having to adopt each meeting requirement for 30 days notice, but the next meeting would be done via remotely. Does that apply to these commissions as well, this commission in particular, or not?
If I may, President Flanagan, Commissioner Jasmine, I believe you're speaking in the public meeting legislation that was just approved. I believe it's AB 391, and that would that will be for any public meetings, depending for the Brown Act. Since we are administered by the Brown Act, I believe this will also affect us, but we'll get more information from the city attorney's office into how will we comply with those regulations.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Kadikian, questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. Zalian, with regards to AB 652, what is PFAS, perfluoroalkyl, and what kind of products are they in?
President Flanagan, Commissioner Kadikian, those could be in any kind of, when they say juvenile products, meaning that any kind of baby products, for example, any toys that might use water to produce such products, or baby formula, anything like that, to make sure that that the water is not that doesn't have any contaminants such as PFAS.
Thank you.
Commissioner Law?
I did have a question. Were there any bills that the city of Glendale in particular supported or opposed this year?
Commissioner Law, we haven't taken any positions ourselves, but we did advocate on behalf of Water and Power through CMUA and SCAPO. We haven't taken any positions, particularly for any specific bills at this time.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Peterson?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple questions on the arrearages bills. For water was $995 million, and for electricity and gas, $1 billion and $300 million for POUs. Is that enough? I have no concept of how much arrearages are we seeking to cover 100% of our arrearages through this funding, or is it a fraction of that?
President Flanagan, thank you for allowing me to elaborate on that. The amount of funding that's been allocated for water and wastewater arrearages, that one, there's enough funding to basically cover almost about 80% or so of our utility arrearages, just depending on what available funding there is. So staff is working with the state currently to ensure there's some guidelines that the state is coming up with, and then it's dividing into priority levels. For example, priority 1 will be residential customers with past due balances of 60 days or more at risk of disconnection. And then priority 2 is residential customers with past due balances of 60 days or more. So there are 4 different priorities. So the state is coming up with some guidelines, and our staff is working with the state to fill out their surveys to see what kind of funding will be available for us for each of the utilities. So all the utilities within the state will be applying for it. we first completed the stage of the survey to look at how much ranges that we have. For example, and on the residential side for electric, we have about $4.6 million outstanding funding or outstanding debt, and in commercial we have about 3.2 million. So total about on the electric side, we have about $8 million of past due debt. So we're gonna kind of look at what the guidelines are presented to the state, and then we'll wait to see how much funding we'll get from the state. And then on the water side, we're about $1.5 million short for the past due bills. So those are the things that we're working with CDC to come up with the guidelines and presenting it to them and see how much money we will get. It looks like possibly we'll get about 80% or so what the CDC has told us so far. So we're waiting to see what the kind of the guidelines go through. At this stage, we're waiting to hear back what the allocation will be for each of the utilities.
Have we ever had a situation where the state has paid off arrearages before that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
And would it be sort of a tricky communication if we get this money and all the arrearages are kind of swept clean, and we would somehow communicate to our customers that are in arrearages that thanks to AB 148 and 135, you're in the clear? Be a happy day in Glendale, right?
Yes, there are some rules on that. Once we do that, once we get the funding, there are some notifications we have to provide for all our customers through the noticing set by the government.
Okay. I had just a comment on the offshore wind AB 525, which to me is very, very exciting. When I think about our climate, our future, our carbon, and driving down our carbon emissions, offshore wind, I think is a huge card for us to be holding, and so I'm thrilled that this got signed into law. 10 gigawatts is a really significant goal, and of course there'll be a lot of focus on how do we do that. There's very few offshore wind farms, but they're being developed really fast right now, and of course our ocean drops off really severely, so we need to have floaters, as they're called, as opposed to systems that are actually anchored to the sea floor. So I'm very excited about that. Are there, one other one, AB 733, and maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Young. This is the study of pump storage, or this is looking at more pump storage. And I always thought that in California we were pretty tapped out in terms of pump storage. We have a few really good sites in the state. They've been developed. Is there, do we have any sort of do we have any opportunities here, or are there any new technologies for pump storage that brings it down to a scale that we could actually do something here in Glendale?
Yes, Mr. President, we do look for opportunities. I think one small opportunity was in San Diego County. So we actually looked at the feasibility of being able to participate in that project. But one, it was too small, and two, it was very difficult for us to be able to get the energy to and from that pump storage facility. I think the big pump storage facility is in an area that's transmission constrained out past Palm Springs. If you're transmission constrained, you're having a problem putting energy into the pump, and when you're transmission constrained, you're going to have a problem getting energy out of the pump. So it makes it very difficult, and it's in the CAISO. So we are looking at that opportunity. I'm very envious of LA and their Castaic project, so I would love to have part of something like that in my portfolio.
Right. And just, we've seen big projects, like Castaic. But what, have you seen this technology getting down to a much smaller scale? Or does it rely on that? Castaic's a gigawatt, I think, and 3 gigawatt hours of energy storage.
The project in San Diego County was actually much smaller. It was right up our alley, except the location was just too far for us to be able to do something with it. So, I think the projects can be smaller. We actually looked at pump storage feasibility at Hoover Dam, and that became a logistic nightmare. And when you add the fact that that Lake Mead is at historic lows, it makes it even more difficult to get that project off the ground.
Yeah.
But the smaller projects are very, very appealing.
And there's a whole new field of gravitational storage. Well, maybe it's not new, but some really fascinating gravitational storage projects that are being developed. that wouldn't require having two enormous lakes, but you're lifting up and off-peak and releasing large weights during the peak period. So I think, we've all witnessed what I call the energy storage or the lithium-ion revolution being based on batteries, but pump storage is by far, if you have the right site, a by far more cost-effective means, and there's a whole bunch of other storage mechanisms that I think are going to be important in our clean energy future.
I totally agree. And I think what it does, it broaches the subject of 8-hour storage or longer. Lithium-ion batteries are really a 4-hour storage solution, and when you have 8-hour storage, then you open the doors to a lot more possibilities of being able to supply nighttime energy.
Very good, thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is 3B, solar and storage development of city-owned properties.
Mr. President, members of commission, I'm going to ask Daniel Scorza, Chief Assistant General Manager of Electric, to give us an update on the solar and storage developments of the city-owned properties.
Okay, now you can hear me. Good afternoon, commission members, President Flanagan, and esteemed members of the commission. So I'm going to discuss what we have in terms of our solar development owner's engineer contract. Basically, what we're doing, we're assessing our properties. We're developing plans and specifications, and we're doing a distribution grid assessment. So that's what my slides will cover today. And then I'll take questions at the end. I'll go through it. I did include some technical aspects of it just to show you what it involves. It's not just looking at a parking lot or an open field and saying we're going to put solar there, but we're also assessing the entire grid in terms of what it can take in terms of solar systems that can be added to it. Okay, so the project scope here, we're looking at the viability of installing solar and battery storage for 100+ properties. We're also doing return on investment, making sure that it makes sense to build there. One example that comes up is like our Alex Theater. Even though it was on our list of properties, it doesn't have much roof space, and it's a historic building, so we realized that will not be a good solar site. We're also doing the distributed energy resource penetration impact study. This is the part where we look at the grid and see how much solar can be added at different locations. As you may remember, we have about 104 feeders. These are the locations of our main wires coming out of our substations that go into the neighborhoods and feed our customers. And that's where we'll be adding solar. So we have to look at our 104 feeders. A little bit about our partner. We awarded the contract to Black & Veatch, a big engineering firm, very experienced. They were the successful bidder out of looking at 7 contracts, and we know they're going to be really good at assessing our properties. We went into the contract in June 2021. First kickoff meeting was in July 20th. And I have a little bit of a diagram of the organization, very experienced people at Black & Veatch working with our GWP staff. We also have an internal partnership. We've talked with our department managers to gain insights into the and preferences of the properties. We're also working with building and safety and public works to make sure that we have information about our facilities. A lot of the times when we look at to install solar at our facilities, we kind of have to have the original prints to see how the structures were built, what they can take in terms of weight, and what kind of mounting technologies can be implemented in those areas. So we're working closely with all the different city departments. One of the initial things is an evaluation baseline, and we're looking at selecting equipment and solar mounting technologies, and also doing some draft designs. And then eventually we're going to do site prioritization and making sure that the sites have the structural and electrical reviews needed. You know, we may, for example, look at an older building, a facility like a parking lot, but as we investigate it, we realize that it may need structural upgrades, which then hinder us from putting in the solar system that can potentially be put on a parking structure. So structural aspects become an important part of it, and that's what we're also evaluating. Structural aspects are also important when we're evaluating city-owned reservoirs. Some have wooden roofs, some have cement structures. We have to know what is the capability of and weight capability of the facility to hold solar panels and or batteries in those sites. On the desktop assessment, we did site identification, working with our owner's engineer. They used Google Earth to identify the location and city preferences, site availability from drawings, easements, permitting, setback requirements. And then Black & Veatch will be utilizing something called Aurora Solar Heloscope software, which kind of gives you a conceptual view of what can be added into the location. In that desktop assessment, which we had performed during August and September, here are some facilities that we're looking at: the police department building, the GCC parking structure, lot 30, that's next to the Armenian church, next to the city college. That's a big parking lot. The sports complex off the freeway. Those are some sites that we're looking at. Example of high priority locations are listed here. You might be familiar with some of them. In fact, Mark and I just came from Fire Station 21. We had a meeting with the fire department on another utility-related issue, and yeah, that's a pretty big site, so that'll be a nice one to have develop, and also where we could put some power walls to provide them with additional backup power, since it's also our 911 center for the Tri-City area. Here's the Aurora software where it adds the solar panels. You can kind of see what it looks like. There's the Perkins building. You can see what solar panels may look like in the future. Police department building, and then Fire Station 21. And the next steps on this is the site visits and data collection. That's going to happen this month. So we'll be working with Black & Veatch and our internal department managers to visit the sites and get more information so that we can compile this prioritized list. And then we'll also continue after that. We'll do our structural engineering review, our electrical review, and then the site prioritization and phase development plan, which will give us the specifications so we could go out for an RFP depending on which projects we want to move forward with. Next thing is the study on the distribution system. We look at the ability for the feeder to be able to take solar panels, solar systems added to it. We use a synergy model, that's the software we're using. Feeder mapping, that's where we have all our electrical lines, the 104 that come out of substations, all mapped out and then modeled in the software. We have feeder minimum load readings, and then we put it into an Excel file to make sure that all the data is completed and given to our partner, Black & Veatch, to do the assessment. They've given us a sample. We gave them 2 feeders that we wanted to see how they were going to do the analysis. One of the things, again, this is a little bit technical, but I just wanted you to know the amount of detail we look. On our feeders, we also have lines that do not feed customers that are sort of backups, and they come to a dead end, or there may have been a property that's been removed. So we have lines that were unfed. So we're going to remove that from our network because they won't electrically contribute. We're changing our feeder voltage from 126 volts to 123. That's what the customer would see. The lower the voltage, the better. The higher the voltage, what happens is that when you add solar into a location on the feeder, it increases the voltage. In fact, if you have too much solar, the voltage will get way high, way beyond what the ratings of our normal home equipment and what the utility is comfortable with. So we're lowering it to 123. That has some limitations of what we can add to the feeders, but it does make sense in that we want to make sure that we don't adversely affect our customers. We're going to update the meter data, minimum meter data at our substations to make sure the demand is measured correctly, and run load allocation using the connected KVA method and update our loads. And here's what the impact penetration study looks like in terms of data. In this case, they were running it at a little bit higher voltage. Here it says that if you're building any solar system between 4 and 100 kilowatts, load independent, meaning location independent, meaning you can put it anywhere in that feeder, we can add up to 5.7 megawatts or 5,700 kilowatts in that region where that feeder is located. It says, I believe, 9G, so that's our 9 Glorieta feeder as an example. But as we do our normal study, we'll be lowering the voltage a little bit, so those numbers will be a little bit lower. But this is the type of data that will come up to us so that we know what we can add to each feeder. And then here's when we add larger loads. Here's larger solar systems. Here's anywhere from 250 to 1,000 kilowatts or 1 megawatt. And in this case, we can add 4.8 megawatts, location independent. Location dependent, depending if it's at the beginning or at the end of the feeders, we may be able to add more or less solar capability. Again, we'll do this for the 104 feeders that we have in our system. So next step is to do this study that we just talked about, and that'll be in the September-November timeframe. Deliverables, the hosting capacity results will present a tabular form and charts similar to the previous examples. So we're probably looking around March or so where we would have data that we can start making some decisions, but for sure by next summer we would have a prioritized list and we would be ready with these specifications so that we can, once decided which project, we can go out for an RFP. So in summary, the owner's engineers for city-owned solar properties will assess the properties, develop the plans and specifications, and do distribution grid assessments. So I'm ready to take questions, any comments that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scorza. Very interesting. Questions and comments? Commissioner Jasmine.
No, I have no questions. This looks wonderful, and I'm looking forward to the next update on this.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, yes, Mr. President. Just for clarifications, so people can understand, this impact study is because we're talking about bringing Sunrun, which is a virtual power plant, online, and also bringing these various solar penetration studies into our grid. So we have to make sure that the grid can handle that big work. So while it sounds a little boring, this is the meat and the potatoes to make sure that our grid can handle the input of all the solar that we're anticipating in the distribution system.
I thank you very much for that. I can't imagine anybody being bored by this. I just think the feeders and the unfed lines and everything is just...
I'm not bored.
I'm not bored.
I'm not bored.
Thank you, Commissioner Law. Commissioner Kadikian, questions, comments?
I don't have any questions, but I am very happy to see this is moving forward. I'm not bored either, so I look forward to a future report on our progress on this.
We now have a majority of commissioners who are not at all bored by this, which is a very good thing. Commissioner Law.
So I am not bored, but I do sometimes get a little lost in jargon. So while I'm following along with what you're saying, I'll be thinking through one thing you're saying, but you've moved on, and then I'm still, sort of 6 paces behind you. So if you have to repeat yourself, I apologize, but that's just because I'm trying to be a very active listener. Was there a specific goal at the beginning of this process? Did you identify like a certain number of installations that GWP wanted to install, or was there a certain megawatt production capability? What was the overarching goal of the project?
Okay. President Flanagan, Commissioner Lull. We had been looking at, sometimes, initially we were looking at our parking structure, and then we're looking at Fire Station 23, a smaller fire station, Fire Station 23, which was next to Verdugo Park. And so we were narrowing it down. There were specific, but what we realized is when we were looking at the projects, there were issues like the structural issues, the electrical amount of electrical work needed on the feeders in light of what we were doing with Sunrun. So what we decided is to go to a systematic method of looking at all the facilities, and we brought in Black & Veatch, who's a big owner's engineering firm that can do this assessment for us. Because if we pick and choose, we may do the right project, but by looking at all these facilities that the city owns and ranking them, we'll pick and choose the right ones. And then we'll have a list that we can use over the years to develop them. We couldn't possibly do all of them at once. We will have to prioritize them. That's what this list will give us. And it will allow us to see which is the biggest bang for the buck. And also locations where we can do this. And then also synchronize it with the Sunrun project, making sure that, one doesn't incorrectly affect the other. If Sunrun is going to have a lot of projects in one location where it's going to help us out, then we'll do our development of city properties in a different location so that we can optimize how much solar we can put in at once. Otherwise, we would also have to do grid enhancements. So we'll try to do the best we can in terms of developing what is available to us with the existing system. And then as we see opportunities for more solar facilities, then we'll have to upgrade the grid to accommodate that.
Okay, so this is sort of building on the existing RFP process and in moving to a comprehensive kind of encyclopedic review of all the possible sites within the city, not just a few kind of cherry-picked sites. It's every possible city-owned facility where we could produce electricity.
That's right. These are city-owned properties. Now, once we do have a commercial system solar program, that's a little bit different as well. That will be another program that we would have to then take into account.
Okay.
But right now, we're just looking at the city-owned properties.
And are there certain like basic litmus tests for what would be considered a viable property? And the reason that I'm asking this is I know a lot of these properties are existing builds, right? They're not new builds. So if you're putting solar panels in the numbers that were shown on some of those diagrams in the presentation, that's a significant amount of weight. And I know that one issue that has come up over and over again with retrofitting existing structures for solar panels is that the solar panels are quite heavy. And the roofs as they're built are not, structurally capable of holding up those facilities. So was there a kind of comprehensive look first through we know we can't do it there because, that's a timber frame structure that could never hold, cost so many millions to upgrade it kind of thing, before they went and started putting little black boxes on PDFs? I guess I'm asking about the process. Was that the first
Sure.
stage, is to say, okay, well, this would be potentially viable or not?
Yes, Commissioner Lowe, in the presentation, the structural review will also occur. After we do the site assessments, that's next. After that, we're going to do a structural review. And that's one of the biggest issues that we found, is that
Right.
we're finding out, oh, you can't put the things that you want on there. You know, it's capable, you have this roof space, oh, but I can't put it on there because the roof won't.
The roof will fall in, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
unless you
right.
reinforce it.
That's right. Yeah, and there are some properties that are parking lots. Then that is not the
not an
issue.
issue.
Then you can build a large frame, steel frame that can support the solar. So that's why it's important to go through it systematically. But there's a structural review, and that was one of the biggest issues that we were faced with as we were looking at properties. Oh no, the roof is wooden. It can't, you can't even walk on it. You got to be careful when
Right.
you walk on it.
Right.
So that's why it's important to go through this assessment. Again, they're going to do a structural assessment as well to let us know if there's any issues. And then we can make the decisions, which ones are we going to go first, because eventually it may make sense to structurally upgrade something if you were
Right.
going to upgrade it anyways. But again, it's this will give us a list with a comprehensive engineering review and all the specifications needed to proceed for an RFP.
So some of this energy that these projects could potentially produce would be energy that that intersects with the Grayson program or repowering, correct? Because it's part of the RFP process that came out of that original conversation around Grayson, is that correct?
This contract is not developed through the RFP. I mean, except insofar as doing the clean energy RFP caused the city to
Right.
explore this new
To go this extra
element.
step, right.
Yeah.
So this, if you trace it back, that's kind of where the conversation started about doing this. Okay, so then now we're in this comprehensive program. So my question is, do we have a sense at this point, and I realize this may be a very premature question, but do we have a sense of how much power could potentially be produced by these projects, or are we just too early at this point to say?
Commissioner Law, I think I might be wrong, but I think we are just a little bit too soon to be able to tell. And the structural review will still actually look of the feasibility, but we just want to see how much it would cost to make it a viable project. And then we can go ahead and determine how many megawatts or how many kilowatts or whatever the numbers are. And then we can figure that out once we get that information.
Okay, and can you just tell me, what is a minimum load reading?
They were looking at the feeders that were coming out. They were talking about the feeder meters at the substations, and I think they wanted to see what was the lowest amount of load they had on each feeder.
Okay.
So they're looking at the maximum and lowest values. And again, this is, I don't do the analysis in software, but this is the type of data they're looking at,
Okay.
comprehensive, to make sure that when they tell us this is the amount of solar additional power you can add to this feeder, and they'll give us a range. And as long as we stay in that range, we don't have to upgrade our distribution system at that location.
Okay, and that's important. And is the idea that the storage would be co-located with the production? So you would have a solar system, like a rooftop solar system, for instance, or no, the storage could be anywhere?
Commissioner Lal, we're looking at potential storage for areas or sites that need to have the storage for backup power. But as a general rule, we're looking to, if we're successful in getting the Grayson repower and getting local batteries at Grayson, we need generating sources to be able to charge that. And if we can get it locally, we would push it back to the distribution system, charge the Grayson power bulk energy storage system, and then use it at a later time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this very unboring presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lal. Commissioner Peterson, questions and comments?
Yes, thank you. I too found it very fascinating. So if we find that I guess one question is, are we only looking at, there must be an assumption of what type of solar panel array, and have we analyzed or rejected then other types that may be potentially less efficient but have less weight load? And so potentially could be deployed on more kinds of existing roofs. I'm sure that this has already been analyzed, so it's probably a dumb question, but if you could maybe speak to that a little bit.
Commissioner Peterson, thank you for the question. We really haven't ruled out anything. As they make recommendations of what the structural limitations are and what the electrical limitations are, we will see. Again, it's a comprehensive study with a very experienced engineering firm. So, those are the questions we're going to ask. Is there any technology that we can add on there that makes sense? But again, we're looking at the biggest bang for the buck and easiest ones first, that we can add solar to our grid. And like Mark said, we'll use that to hopefully charge up the Grayson large battery, and it'll be done locally. We don't have to use transmission. So that's our goal, to get as much solar as we can, as quickly as possible. And again, we wish we had infinite resources, but we don't. So within the budget constraints that we'll have, within the resources that we have within GWP, we'll do our best. And this list is what's going to help us do that. And this engineering firm is going to help us do that.
Thank you. And then you had mentioned that you're going to be decreasing the voltage from 126 to 123. It's about a 2.8% decrease. What is the impact then on, how much of a decrease on efficiency does that constitute with regard to a given portion of the grid then?
Well, one of the things that we've looked at, we felt 126 was too high of a voltage to have on the local grid, because there's limitations. When you have 126 average, at the local end or the closer end to the substation, it'll be higher. At the other end, at the farthest end, it'll be lower. So we wanted 123 to make sure that we don't have voltages that are too widespread apart and that we won't be damaging customer equipment. We got to be careful, because that's the issue that happens if you add too much solar in a location. The voltage will start going up. It's sort of a generator. Voltage climbs higher the more generation you put in terms of the solar inverters. So we have to be within our limitations so that our power quality meets our standards. And we felt 123 was a better standard to meet, so that we wouldn't be damaging our customers' equipment and compromising our system.
Is that something that you're doing immediately, or just something you're anticipating once you have more information, you start deploying these? Because again, I'm wondering if we are making a certain amount of generation, but then because we're lowering the voltage, we're raising the resistance, and therefore ultimately we're getting that much less power out to the end user, less current.
Yeah. Commissioner Peterson, we have current standards that we keep. We have a voltage reduction system where we have our system that runs our tap changers. It looks at meter voltages at customer sites and adjusts the entire system voltage so that it maximizes energy use. It actually lowers the voltage, but what we found is the 126, it was going to be too high, and that we would not have good control of voltage in our system. So we went to this more conservative number to allow us to control the system as best we can. As we add more solar systems that we control, that are city-owned or GWP-owned, we can then adjust outputs and adjust the inverters to control voltage better. So in the future, I suspect that we would be able to better manage the voltages around the city. But right now, the way it is, where it's we're putting in solar systems, customers are putting in solar systems, we have to be conservative so that we don't damage customer equipment. And so this is sort of our method to do that. But as time passes, we should be able to better control the voltages because we'll have control of a lot of these larger solar systems as they're being deployed. And the inverters could be adjusted to regulate the voltage throughout the city. And that will be one method instead of capacitor banks that are normally utilized to control voltages or moving taps on our substation transformers to adjust the voltage. Having control of photovoltaic systems throughout the city will allow us to do that in a better way. So, yeah, it might not be the optimum voltage right now, but it is a conservative way of making sure that we do not damage customer or our equipment throughout the system.
Thank you for that detailed question. So I guess what I'm hearing then is it's more a matter of ensuring that you are safeguarding and protecting customers that are designed for a certain set of existing parameters, rather than so much worried about the infrastructure, the distribution infrastructure itself, or the wires not being rated for a given volt. More about protecting the customers and the equipment that are connected to it.
That sounds great. Yeah, good point. Good way of summarizing it, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. And I, too, I salute Mr. Scorza. I salute not only the study, but your explanation of it and your professorial tone that I always enjoy so much. I guess to the list of site assessment steps, I'm sure that Black & Veatch is looking at the roof condition, and that's another very important variable, because of course you don't want to put a solar asset, 25-year solar asset on a roof that needs to be replaced. And I appreciate the prioritization, and I do see, I guess I caution any cherry picking, because if we only take the very best sites, we'll never go down into the ones that are sort of the mediocre sites. And so there is certainly a rationale to eliminate the real dogs that you just can't work with and that provide very little, like maybe the Alex Theater, but I would certainly encourage you to look at bundling together some of the less attractive sites with the most attractive sites, because there is a conflict between getting as much solar as we can, and I know that those that are working on the climate action planning here in the city are going to be very much looking towards getting as much solar as we can, and getting the easiest first and getting the biggest bang for the buck. So just that, I see some nodding, and just that whole bundling concept. Do you want to make a comment, Mr. Young?
Yes, President Flanagan, you are correct. I think it's just one of a multitude of decision processes that we're going to have to look at. I think the penetration of the Sunrun solar is going to probably dictate where we put our solar, just so we don't overburden our electric distribution system. Because remember, our electric distribution system is being upgraded from 4 kV to 12 kV and from 34 to 69 kV. So we're in the process of upgrading the distribution system. So we're going to be looking at maybe focusing on a certain area of the city because there's more solar penetration in that area. So it's only going to be one of many decision processes in order for us to be able to pick the optimal solar project.
Right, and then we're, my company is working with cities like the city of Berkeley up in Northern California that has a goal of making every one of its municipal facilities energy resilient. And so you bring in a whole other value into the equation, that it's not just the cost effectiveness of solar, but it's solar plus storage, and then that cost is offset by this tremendous community resilience value. And I think as we get further into this climate crisis, and we have more and more frequent storms and ferocity and more outages, there may well be a call for all of our sites, even those that are not cost effective today for solar, to become energy resilient sites, and that would be a tremendous community benefit. So something for us to have our sights on in the future. I take it the Glendale Community College parking lot is owned by the city, and is controlled by, and is not a Glendale property. Is that correct, Commissioner Peterson?
So the parking lots that are across Verdugo Road from Glendale Community College Verdugo campus are all city-owned. These are parking lots 30 through 34 and the Civic Auditorium parking structure. And then the parking lots that Glendale College owns on its various campuses, we have entered into a revenue sharing agreement, an MOU between the city and Glendale College, where we collect all of the various fee revenues from all of the city and college parking lots, and then we end up splitting the revenue on a basis. So in terms of being able to build over those lots across the street, that's completely within the city's hands.
Very good. The Brand landfill site that you mentioned, I think I've been up there, and one of the most creative thoughts I ever heard was to create a sustainability center up there and to have an actual facility owned by the city where perhaps there could be youth programs and there could be different kinds of receptions. It's an extraordinary view. So that's a real dream, pipe dream maybe, but something that we might want to think about when maybe there's an opportunity for a couple different uses up there. Just a comment. I'm glad we made the comment, or Mr. Young made the comment about the DER impact study. It kind of struck me when I was looking at the slide deck before the meeting. It seems like almost a different deal. We got the municipal facility study going on here, and then we got the whole DER impact study that, as you clarified, would encompass, would tell us what our limits are for when we add together municipal solar with residential solar, with the Sunrun deal, ultimately with commercial solar. We have to look at all those together and how they're impacting the grid. And I wondered, maybe Mr. Scorza, you could comment on this. How would a heavy EV penetration factor into that equation, or does it factor into that equation? How much capacity we can put in the grid? Is that a separate function altogether?
Well, in that study, they're going to tell us what each feeder could take in terms of different size solar systems. That's why there's the larger and smaller. But they're going to tell us as it exists today. But this contract that we have with Black & Veatch is a 4-year contract. In this first year, they're going to do the assessment of the properties, but the penetration study goes over 4 years. So every year, they're going to reassess our entire system. So as it evolves, including the Sunrun project, we will see where we can add or need to improve in some cases, because we can add solar there. We may need to improve our distribution system in that location. Again, coupled with our 4 to 12 kV conversion project, we may have to also utilize that to upgrade certain locations to allow us to add the solar, because those are the locations where solar could frankly be added most easily, and Sunrun got the most contracts there, for example, if they did. So it's a coordination effort between several factors. It's not just this city-owned, it's the Sunrun, it's the 4 to 12 kV conversion.
But I understand, we have,
Yes.
these are all generators. All these solar systems are
Sure.
generators coming in. And so we're being limited as to how much we can put into the grid. If we have a tremendous EV adoption in the city, which we will we have to upgrade our distribution system anyway to account for that? And then that will allow for more capability in terms of adding more solar.
President Flanagan, that's exactly right. So EV is a load. So energy would be flowing into the customer's house at a high rate. And if you have a high solar penetration, you're generating and the energy is flowing out of the customer to the distribution at a high rate. So we would definitely have Black & Veatch look at this as we start to mature the EV penetration. But I don't know if we anticipated EV, but we realized that our 4 kV distribution system was inadequate, and in order for us to get more bang for the buck out of our distribution system. We went to a 12 kV system, essentially being able to triple our size or triple the capacity of that distribution system. So the faster we can get to 12 kV, the easier it is for us to be able to accommodate both EV and high penetration of
So
solar.
then the Black and Veatch study right now is based on, some of it's based on 4 kV, and some of it's based on 12 kV. And as you said, over 4 years, we'll have more and more 12 kV, and we'll be able to assess that. Seems like those are really big, these are really big factors that.
And on the field, they do field switching, and so certain, like this part of the block is on this feeder, and that part of the block is on another feeder. So it isn't just at the feeder level, it's at the house level. So if you're overloading one feeder, what they do is they go out into the field and they climb a pole and they switch the sources of electricity to a different feeder. We're always doing that. The engineering department is always doing that to make sure that the feeders are balanced.
Yeah.
So that's always being done, but that would also be included in the Black and Veatch study as it matures.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And President Flanagan, also, we're also looking at the substations. We may need to add substations or expand existing substations. EV load as it grows, eventually it may double our load. That tells us that our substations would have to grow, either expanded or add substations at locations that, new substations throughout the city.
This sounds like a nice confluence between our goal to have a large adoption of EVs and our goal to have as much distributed energy as possible. They're going to enable each other, I think, at this point. Did you have a comment? I saw your light go on there at one point, Commissioner Lal.
Thank you, President Flanagan. I guess I was just wondering, in addition to this, and I realize this is kind of outside of the purview of the project that you're discussing today, but Glendale has built out a significant number of new buildings in the last 5 to 10 years, and there are plans afoot to build more. I'm thinking specifically of like the Armenian American Museum, which is going to be built in the downtown area. It's a significant building. In concert with what you're doing, are you also talking to the owners of new projects like this about potentially co-locating, where you have city property, you have new development? Do those conversations occur as well? I realize it's a little bit of a tangent, but I was just curious.
I believe there's rules for new housing as to what they have to abide by with today's standards, and that would really be in community development, I believe. So we don't have an active role in trying to sway or to influence their construction as it relates to Glendale load, if that was what you were asking.
Yeah, I was thinking more like commercial properties or properties like, we've got this new museum being built and it's right next to and adjacent to city property. So I was just wondering if that had come up, because again, you were talking about co-locating.
I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, that'd be like a public-private partnership. But
Right, because the
museum could say,
the
okay,
library's right there, and then you've got the Mona, you've got a whole cluster of buildings, and I think this is probably true in a lot of cases. You're going to have city-owned property directly adjacent to private property, directly adjacent to housing, directly adjacent to commercial. So I realize I don't want to, kind of go off the deep end here, but do those conversations occur as well when you see those adjacent proximity to a potential next use?
It's an interesting point, and I know, for example, the Glendale College, the existing solar, that's a similar public-private partnership where Glendale worked with the college to get that installed, so I
Right,
appreciate the
and the
comment.
power just feeds right into the grid. So the college becomes a host site.
Right.
It's much like a feed-in tariff, but there might be opportunities in new construction to have that kind of a partnership.
Yeah, especially when you're adjacent to existing city properties. For instance, Glendale Central Library and the Adult Day Recreation Center, when you have a new property being built directly next door, there's an opportunity there for economies of scale with adjacent properties, potentially. And you don't have the roof problem if it's built when it's new.
That's right.
I believe all new construction has accounted for having solar built on it, like Mark Young was.
All new residential by state code now. I think by 2030, all commercial.
And
as well.
I believe commercial may also have
We'll have to,
certain,
commercial by 2030, we'll have to be 100% self-sufficient.
yeah.
unless
But
you
the
get
new
variance.
buildings, yeah, well, of course, they can take
But
solar.
there are certainly examples. We work for the city of Santa Monica. We have stretch codes that are accelerating that kind of a, not a partnership, but accelerating the solar on commercial buildings faster than the state code is requiring it. So the unfed lines are kind of intriguing to me. And you said you're going to remove them, but are those something that could be used for EVs or could be used for additional?
We're going to remove them from the model, not
from the
from the
model.
thing, yeah.
Not physically remove them.
Not physically remove them.
You're not going to be working overtime,
that's
Dan,
right,
on
no,
weekends out
no.
there?
We
taking
keep
these
them there
lines away?
because we'll probably utilize it, Somebody
Okay,
may put a solar system at the end of it. But they exist there, but they're not adding to the electrical load. They just look like,
Right.
it looks funny on the model. They said, why do you have all this? Well, they exist, so we put it into our electrical model, but they have no load on them, so.
Yeah. So I did some really detailed math during your presentation, and 100 feeders or 104 feeders, and the Black and Veatch assessment of a couple of them showed that you could put about 5 megawatts on each one. So 500 megawatts of distributed solar in Glendale.
That's probably the maximum capability. But, right now, I did the same math. I said, okay, well, if that was if not Glorieta 9 was typical, so 500.
They always tell you not to do math, at the
Yeah.
podium or whatever. but
Yeah, and I
5
go-
times 100.
Yeah.
I had it. And
I get 500 too.
You got
Yeah.
500.
Okay, so we did the
We're on
math
tonight.
the right way.
And here's the tougher question, because I know that this clean energy RFP was put out many years ago now, or several years ago now, and this commercial side has been slow to develop, and I know that we're doing all of our due diligence, and I support that. But, and I think you mentioned that we'll have some sort of results in March. When will we actually have some solar on some municipal buildings here? I mean, how many years out do you think it'll be before we actually have some solar on these buildings? And is there any urgency to?
President Flanagan, I know as soon as I say something, somebody's going to write that date down and call
I'm
me the
going
day
to.
after. Our goal is to get it done as fast as possible, at least to start the process. We have some monies that we allocate on a yearly basis to allow us to do that. So our goal is to start the processes, and depending on how hard they are, we would start that process as soon as we get the information. So again, please don't quote me. By next fiscal year, I'm hoping that we have implementations of 1 or 2 of those projects.
So, okay, thank you, and we will quote you in a friendly way. But that suggests to me that you're putting it like a squirrel, you're putting a few acorns away every year in order to build a few of these projects. I thought when we had the comprehensive assessment going on that if we didn't have the cash, we would use third-party financing for some of these. Am I wrong?
No, you are right.
Then we could do all of them at once.
I think the way I like to do is I like to put my foot in the water before I jump in. So once we get our feet wet with 1 or 2 of these projects, then we can go ahead and start moving faster. But we also have to make sure that it's a planned acceleration, not just put a bunch of things in just for the sake of putting a bunch of projects in. So we would probably do an RFP where somebody would come in, they would do it. So it wouldn't be staff that would be doing it. So it's not going to be laborious for staff other than project management. So we're looking at being able to do that. And once we've learned how to do that and develop the process, I'm sure that it would be much faster.
Well, I think, certainly speaking for myself, I would really encourage spending the time developing the portfolio and then doing it all in one fell swoop. This solar is not particularly complicated. It's been done for many, many years, and there's lots of really, really competent firms, and we're involved in major projects now where we're doing many, many sites at the same time. So this is just all getting to, supporting our system with as much clean energy as we possibly can. This will be a really important part of that. And I think if we tie it with resilience, which I know is not so much the focus of this Black and Veatch study, but I think we ought to be looking at resilience at the same time. And when they actually go out to each one of these sites, I think they really ought to be looking at where storage fits into the equation, where it fits into the switchgear, where it spatially fits into the equation, because I think we're going to want that also at all these sites at some point in the future. So thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is 4, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to the appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Do we have comments?
We don't have any
We have no comments.
No.
Okay, but next item, please.
Next item is 5, agenda forecast.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any comments on the agenda forecast? Commissioner Jasmine,
No comments.
Commissioner Kadikian,
Yes, with regards to the repower or the Grayson, I know the comment period was extended to November 15, I think. So when do we expect a date for either the commission to hear final report or make a decision on it?
Mr. President, members of commission, Commissioner Kadikian, we're in the process right now of trying to change our calendar to figure out how to incorporate being able to present all the appropriate commissions prior to going to council. So I don't have a definitive answer for you yet.
well, our next, is it correct that our next meeting is going to be a joint meeting? Is that, am I correct about that? We shifted from November 1st to November 4th? Catalina, is that right?
Mr. President, that was prior to the extension of the public comment period for Grayson.
Okay,
So, no, we're no longer going to have that joint meeting. And I think also this commission was sort of weighing whether it wanted to do a joint meeting versus separate meeting.
right. And how would we give that feedback how would we give that feedback on the effectiveness of the joint meetings, or is that something we should be discussing right here and now, or?
I mean, I guess we could agendize it to discuss, you know, I mean, agenda forecast, it sort of falls in that category. Do you have any feedback that you,
Right.
you
Do you have any
would like to
comment
share?
about that, Commissioner Law?
That is a subject that I would be interested in, and I would like to agendize it.
Okay. Well, we
I'd
could
like to
talk,
put it on the agenda for the
we could
next
talk
meeting?
about it in November. You have a fairly open agenda for that meeting, if you'd like.
Okay, and Commissioner Law, did you have a comment?
Only, my question is, are we having a meeting in November if, you know, I understand there's been a shift in the timeline. So right now, our November meeting is showing that we have no agenda items. So are we having that meeting, or are we going straight to December?
Commissioner Lala, if it's possible, I would like to refrain from answering your question for a week. We have another item that we want to bring to you, but we're pushing very hard to get it to be to a point of being able to present to you.
Okay.
And if that were the case, then we can present to you, and it would be a very good meeting in November.
Oh, great, okay.
So if I can have another couple of days to determine whether we can get it to you or not, and I will email.
That's great.
That's fine,
And
sorry.
then Commissioner Kadikian, are you, did you want to comment on the joint commission meeting at this time, or did you want to wait till the next meeting?
No, we can wait till the next meeting, and again, we can tentatively schedule it for the November. And if GWP has other matters to put on that agenda item, then we can have a November meeting. And if there's nothing and that's the only topic, I don't know, we could just probably shift it to December and not have a meeting in November if that is the wish of the remainder of the commission members.
Okay. I'll just comment that it was very interesting having the joint meetings, and we both commissions, well, we were quite consistently in disagreement with each other, and probably pretty polar opposite in many ways, which is crazy because I always think of myself as a sustainability commission guy. But anyway, we learned a lot in the process. So, are there other?
But also,
Oh, go ahead.
part of the part of the reason I was suggesting that is I think certain things are beneficial to have joint meetings. I think presentation meetings, for example, would be beneficial because then GWP staff don't have to do the same thing 3 times, one to us, once to sustainability, and finally again to city council. You know, if it's just a presentation, I think it's beneficial to have it joint. But other items, and that's where we would brainstorm during the meeting and discuss what would be something that we should do jointly and what would not necessarily be beneficial to do jointly. That's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. That's great. Are there any other agenda items that any commissioners, Commissioner Peterson, anything to add to the agenda?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is 6, adjournment.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Do we have a second?
I'll
Second?
second.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.